Office had the best looking distant scenery in Counter-Strike Source, but Vertigo had the best in Global Offensive, featuring a vast city stretching out into the distance. And in its move to Counter-Strike 2, it's been enhanced and has acquired a few extra distant layers of scenery, some floaty clouds, improved shadow definition, and higher res textures, which now seem to be bump mapped to give the illusion of 3D looking windowsills. I'll just toggle between the map from CSGO to the new one in CS2 a few times, just to let you soak these changes up. There. Isn't that nice? Meanwhile, this is how it looked in the original version of the map, way back before most of you were born, and in the distance, a bunch of drawn-on buildings, courtesy of a primitive 2D skybox. I love these for their unworldly atmosphere, and for their early pre-rendered graphics which feel simultaneously old-fashioned and futuristic at the same time, or at least they do to me. One way of generating these sorts of images is by using a program like TerraGen. This generates an overhead map of hills and valleys. You choose the position you want to draw it from and the angle that you want to be facing. You get this tiny little preview image, and then when you're ready, you click Render Image and wait for ages for it to generate it in super high quality. Although these days you only have to wait a few seconds, because computers have got a bit faster since the 90s. And these days TerraGen is a really advanced program. But luckily the old nostalgic version is still around. Unfortunately, the distant scenery found in older Counter-Strike games now looks hilariously pixelated and dated. So how do we improve on these distant images? Now, the way that Counter-Strike Classic Offensive has gone about it is to upscale these old skyboxes, making them look much sharper and higher in resolution. But no matter how high the quality of the 2D skybox, it won't remedy the fact that it's a 2D skybox. Since these are just pictures, they don't appear to move as you do. This is okay for super distant things like clouds and mountains, but if you want something that's only a bit big and only slightly far away, like buildings in a city, then having them remain static as you're moving like this feels weird, because it's unlike anything you'll ever see in real life. This weird effect is particularly prominent in maps such as Office, or with the skyscrapers on Vertigo. The only way buildings could ever appear like this is if they're impossibly large and far away. With Source, they found a solution to this by introducing the 3D skybox, being kind of like the scenery you find in a normal level, but put in the distance. So what do they do with this new technology? They make an impossibly large building with it that doesn't appear to move. But it gets better, because towards the end of the Source 1 era, Valve also featured a 2D skybox that appears to move as you do. And what do they use this amazing technology to draw? Distant stars and planets, which shouldn't move at all. Jokes aside, Vertigo's 3D skybox has always been a thing of wonder, with cars driving past and roads and skyscrapers leading out into the mist. Today, I'm going to visit it. In CSGO, if you fly towards it, then you can't, because it'll get shy and disappear once you get close. The only way you can fly about it is to take a trip to the miniature model of it, which is hidden somewhere beyond the playable area. Look, there it is. So this is what you see around the level normally, but here it hasn't been blown up to massive proportions. So the skybox in Counter-Strike 2 behaves slightly differently. For a start, there is no miniature model hidden off the side of the level somewhere. However, you don't really need it, because you can now just visit it by no-clipping beyond the playable area. Nothing will be solid, and the real world will still show up in front of it no matter how far away it is, so it's not really as good as being here for real, but it's quite a convincing projection. It's just a shame that Counter-Strike 2 has a terrible, terrible limitation, because it won't let you travel more than 16,000 units from the game's central point. Not even when in spectator mode. Isn't that a shame? So if you want to explore the 3D skybox in Counter-Strike 2, then the best way is simply to load the console up and to boot up the skybox for Vertigo manually. Doing this, it behaves like its own level, only on a miniature scale, which lets us venture further from the central point before running into the 16,000 unit limitation. And it looks like Midtown madness. Here's a miniature car park. Here are several minute police cars. Notice how each of them has different bits rendered. This is for optimization to save like a millionth of a frame a second. So that's why this police car here doesn't have sections of its bumper. There. Was it worth it? As we get further from the centre, less and less of it is drawn, and we can see just how primitive these building models are, though their reflections still look great, if a bit skewed from this far out. Then we reach the distant cloud layers, which are just flat billboards with some kind of flowing river effect on them to give them a grainy, pulsating appearance. And then we eventually reach flat layers of buildings, at which point we're down to CS 1.6 levels of skybox detail again. And in the very distance, the mountains linger, but we can't get to them because they're so far away that even on a miniature scale, they're still more than 16,000 units out. It's odd how they're not drawn at great distances when we're in the level like this, yet when this map is used as a 3D skybox, they are. So it feels like for Source 2 Vertigo, Valve was content to use this new engine to simply make the 3D skybox bigger than it ever was in CSGO. I mean, This sort of scale could have been done in Source 1 by halving the size of everything and by doubling the 3D Skybox magnification scale, but I see the Source 2 method of giving the 3D Skybox its own entire map gives developers more freedom than were they to use the CSGO method of having to hide it in a spare and unused part of the main level somewhere. But with Overpass being a fully remade map, I thought it was worth exploring this new map's Skybox to see what the future of Skyboxes may hold. And honestly, I'm a bit disappointed. This new map Skybox is far less complete and smaller in scale than Vertigo's is. It wouldn't look out of place in a CSGO map's background. So how does Overpass's new Skybox compare with its old one? When I revisited the old version of this map in its Skybox, a few things stood out. Most prominently, the old Overpass relied on a low-resolution 2D row of buildings encircling the map. These also repeated a few times and, if I'm honest, appeared too close to the playable space to pass as being full-sized structures. The new Overpass Skybox favours real 3D foreground details, hiding the lack of distant ones by placing more and taller stuff in front of it. My first impression when I saw this was wow, so while there's not a lot here compared with the 3D Skybox of Vertigo, there's enough to sell the illusion that this is a city, especially when the player is situated down in an overpass. Whatever. This distant bridge is what I think helps complete the look, and it also helps this map to live up to its name. This bridge isn't even in the 3D Skybox. Looking the other way, or up towards the large tower, an increased amount of haze helps with the sense of scale. It's an age-old trick to hide lack of detail by fogging stuff up, but CSGO Overpass clearly forgot to use it. It's a shame these cranes no longer rotate, and I kind of like the old cloud effect, even if it was only in a central square patch of the sky. We now just get a standard moving cloud dome, but we do get a new moving plane going through the sky. It's completely flat. But then how do we know they aren't in real life as well? So yeah, overall this new Skybox is probably an improvement, but definitely not a decade's worth of improvements. But if you're the sort of person who enjoys high FPS, then you're probably thankful of that. And what is here contains nice sharp looking textures, using all of Source 2's new advanced material effects to make them look convincingly bumpy and shiny. This is best demonstrated on the tower's pyramid-like appearance, which, when I turn on wireframe, will show you that each of these pyramids, which looks like 4 triangles, are only made of 2. To be honest, that isn't even a great saving if you ask me. But it goes to show that Source 2's new features can sometimes reduce the amount of detail required in order to draw something that looks right. So far, Source 2 hasn't brought many new and exciting 3D Skyboxes to the table. It has enhanced Vertigo's, being the previous best, but the new one in Overpass doesn't exactly reach a new paragon of excellence. And the only other Skyboxes that are more than just a bunch of generic buildings placed in the distance are Nukes and Dust 2s, both of which existed in this form in CSGO already. So looking to the future, which maps do I expect to have the best new 3D Skyboxes in Source 2, and why? Italy's a candidate because there's currently nothing of interest in its 3D Skybox. And it's going to be a fully remade level with at least one giant mountain in its 3D Skybox, which we can see here in this preview video. But that might be all we get, as being a map full of tall buildings with narrow corridors, it's not a layout that lends itself well to beautiful distant vistas. So you know what? I'm going to say our best hopes of a new beautiful 3D Skybox lie with Lake, because there's a screenshot of it out already and it looks terrible. Bear with me here, I don't think this remake is complete, because you see this water here? It's just flat and blue. Now look at the water that we get on other Source 2 maps, like Overpass. See, at the very least, they're going to port that water over to Lake as a low-effort solution to make the map look much better. But Lake is more than just a bit of water. It's a lake, which extends far into the 3D Skybox. So I'm fascinated to see how they go about improving this, because this view looked pretty terrible even when CSGO first came out more than 10 years ago. And then, even if they make the distant water look great, the mapper is going to look up a bit, see this disgusting 2D low-res distant scenery, and be like, Valve, please fix. They'll realise they're talking to themselves, and then they'll spend several days lovingly decorating it with pretty new distant Source 2 based scenery, finally making Lake into a map worthy of that name. Or at least, that's my dream.